It was like a dream of paradise on earth. A loving couple governed Egypt and provided their people with peace and happiness. Nefertiti was the most beautiful woman in the realm, and Akhenaten the greatest visionary of his time. They had a grandiose new capital built, dedicated to their only god Atun. Yet the dream perished in disaster. Monuments of the royal couple were recklessly destroyed. Priests declared Akhenaten a heretic. Even the royal tomb was desecrated. But what happened to the mummies? Did they too fall victim to the priests' hatred? The first rumors about a forgotten pharaoh reached Europe in the middle of the 19th century. The first evidence was found by the scholar Richard Lepsius. He began documenting the treasures of Egypt's ancient art in 1842. In tomb complexes and temples, his staff copied wall paintings and took casts of bas-reliefs. From Cairo, his journeys took him south. He kept an exhaustive diary about the work of the Royal Prussian expedition at the stops on their journey, following the Nile further and further upstream. In Middle Egypt, near the town of Asyut, Lepsius made an astonishing discovery. On both banks of the Nile, he found traces of a pharaoh whose name was missing from the established list of kings. His curiosity was aroused. Feverishly, he followed what hints the locals could give him. In his diary, one can read about monumental bas-reliefs and tomb complexes decorated in a highly unusual style. The mysterious pharaoh is said to be their builder. A border stela hewn into the rock told of a huge city whose ruins were nowhere to be seen, yet the city existed, hidden under the sand of millennia. High above the small desert settlement of Tel el Amarna, holes are discernible in the rock face. Lepsius found unfinished tombs. Even the memorial statue of a deceased court official remains faceless. Nonetheless, the complex offered fascinating new insights for the German scientist. The walls are adorned with highly unusual images. A god named Atun rides a heavenly chariot, or is it the mysterious deified pharaoh who is holding the reins? Chancellor Ramosi. His tomb, built several years previously in Thebes, was still furnished entirely in the traditional style. Hundreds of gifts were given to the deceased on his last journey. Ample food and beautiful flowers. The dead man was lacking in nothing. Even dying seems to lose its terror in these surroundings. The stay in the hereafter was made to be as comfortable as that in this life. This was vouched for by the pharaoh and by the priests along with him. In a last sacral act, the ritual of the opening of the mouth, the corpse was finally reborn. Of this, the Egyptians had no doubt. The priest, wearing a mask of Anubis, touched the mouth so that the dead man could once again eat, drink, and speak. The richly decorated tomb bears witness to the prosperity of that time. it was a world full of pleasures and luxury. Tribute filled the royal coffers. Egypt had never experienced such wealth before. At the beginning of the 20th century, another German expedition arrived at Amarna. The area was systematically excavated and every find was archived. The excavation of a sculptor's workshop yielded especially rich rewards. Many of the statues are preserved unusually well. The archaeologists found new hope. Their finds until that point had been mostly fragments. The city had obviously been destroyed deliberately. An archaeological sensation occurred on the 6th of December 1912. Excited, the workers alerted the man in charge of the dig, Ludwig Borchardt. When he carefully uncovered the find, it took his breath away. In the diary of the dig, he noted laconically, describing it as useless, "Look at it." There had never been anything comparable before. It's not surprising that the people of Akhenaten worship Nefertiti like a goddess. Does this also explain why nothing is known about her origins? Is the reason why her parents were never named because a goddess could not be a descendant of man? The storehouse of the Egyptian Museum in Berlin. This is where a part of the finds from Amarna is kept. Professor Dietrich Wildung is looking for evidence of Nefertiti's fate. Thousands of broken fragments prove that a whole epoch was violently annihilated. Among the fragments, Nefertiti's sensuous mouth. The important question is, when and why was her statue destroyed? Suddenly her name ceased to appear in Akhenaten. Had she fallen out of favor and been cast out, as supposed by many scientists?
The only evidence of a burial for Nefertiti is provided by these two fragments of the tomb statuette of a queen, this one which is at the Brooklyn Museum in New York, and this one from the Louvre in Paris. And this can be shown, even though they don't fit together directly, by having a middle part like this molded. This shows that both fragments may belong together. And the inscription reads, "The noble woman, the great one of the palace, the praised one of Akhenaten's, the great royal spouse Nefertiti, may she live forever." And this proves that Nefertiti was buried. Moreover, she was buried with honor, with her full titles, and not as an outcast as was supposed for a long time.
This burial with honor can only have occurred in a single place, the royal tomb of Amarna. It had always been a desolate canyon. By order of Akhenaten, his whole family was to be buried here. Many walls are hewn only roughly, and a large part of the customary decoration is missing. The tomb complex was obviously never finished. However, in a side chamber, there are traces of a large bas-relief. The inscriptions and pictures bear witness to the deep grief felt by Akhenaten and Nefertiti when they buried their second-born daughter. Her early death must have been a shock. Even Atun could not shield the royal family from suffering. And even after death, Akhenaten's family did not find peace. Even the images on the walls of the burial chamber were brutally chiseled off, down to the sun disk of Atun. In the middle of the room, an empty pedestal of stone. No trace of Akhenaten's or Nefertiti's sarcophagi, and no trace of the royal couple's mummies. Were helpers faithful to the king able to spirit the corpses to safety? One trail leads to the famous Valley of the Kings on the western bank of the Nile near Thebes. Almost all pharaohs of the New Realm had their last resting places built here. Splendid paintings adorn the walls of the tombs even today. However, there are hardly any royal mummies left in the stone sarcophagi.
Discover the past with exclusive ancient history documentaries and ad-free podcasts presented by world-renowned historians from History Hit. Watch them on your smart TV or on the go with your mobile device. Download the app now to explore everything from the wonders of Pompeii to the rebellion of Boudica and the mysteries of prehistoric Scotland. Immerse yourself in the captivating stories of this remarkable era by signing up via the link in the description.
We're accompanying Dr. Nasri Iskander, a specialist who is much in demand concerning the mummies of ancient Egypt. He's on his way to the grave of Pharaoh Amenhotep II. 100 years ago, archaeologists made a puzzling discovery here. Next to the empty sarcophagus, they discovered the mummies of the most famous pharaohs. What had happened here? In 1871, the brothers Rasul were ranging throughout the western mountains of Thebes. Like almost all locals, they earned a lucrative extra wage by raiding tombs. They discovered a tomb hidden away deeply at the bottom of a crevice. No one had entered it for millennia. The dreams of these men seemed to be coming true. There were boxes with statuettes of the dead, statuettes of the gods, and amulets everywhere. A large number of grand sarcophagi appeared in the flickering light. This was when the Rasuls knew they had not entered any ordinary tomb. This discovery was something very special. There were too many sarcophagi and mummies here at once. However, they did not find any real treasure. They had been preempted by other grave robbers in antiquity. Greed for gold used to overcome any scruples or fears even then. It was not the beauty of the items of jewelry, but only the value of the precious metals that attracted the plunderers as if by magic. Scientists estimate that several hundred kilograms of such ancient works of art were simply melted down, an irretrievable loss for mankind. When, 3,000 years later, more and more extraordinary burial gifts appeared in the international trade in antiquities, the trail quickly led to Kurna. The village is situated at the entrance to the Valley of the Kings. From the beginning, the police suspected the brothers Rasul. Threats of a long prison sentence and the vigorous methods used in interrogation led to a full confession. Mohammed Rasul revealed the location of the hidden tomb. More than 30 mummies were brought to daylight by the archaeologists under police protection. Even pharaohs as legendary as Ramesses the Great. Far from their original tombs, here they had found a second resting place. Now they traveled back down the Nile to the museum in Cairo. 100 years later, French researchers want to uncover Pharaoh Ramesses' last secrets. In a purpose-built lab, the patient is examined. What 3,000 years of sleep in the desert had not been able to do was done by the air at the museum in a very short time. The corpse had been attacked by 89 highly toxic types of mold. The medical diagnosis tells us Ramesses had trouble walking. His vertebrae had fused together. He was 90 years old, 173 centimeters tall, and had reddish blonde hair dyed yellow with henna by the embalmers. Probable cause of death, blood poisoning owing to a tooth abscess. His hands seem well groomed and are wrapped in fine royal linen. However, from him who in his lifetime trampled his enemies into the dust, who had many hundreds of thousands of tons of stone piled up to show his glory, death took all outward splendor. The fate of a glorious ruler. But what fate befell the heretic Akhenaten? Mummy Dr. Iskander knows that a secret is hidden in a side chamber of the tomb at Amenhotep. By opening it, the scientist hopes to shed light on a dark chapter of the time of the pharaohs. Not all royal mummies have so far been identified, and of some rulers there is no trace. Behind the wall, 3 mummies lie hidden. Dr. Iskander is looking for hints as to their identities. The bodies are badly damaged. There are traces of violence everywhere. The consequences of careless embalming? Or the work of plunderers? Who else could have had an interest in mutilating the corpses? Could these mummies even be from the time when the realm was ruled by Akhenaten, who was remembered in the history of Egypt as the heretic? Could the best preserved mummy be, in fact, Queen Tia, as supposed by the finders of this cache of mummies? However, Akhenaten's mother must have been more than 50 years old at her death. Investigations prove that the mummified woman died at no more than 35 years of age, an age that corresponds exactly to that of Nefertiti. Is it here that the mummy of the rejected queen lies? But where is Akhenaten? Elsewhere in the Valley of the Kings, in 1907, the American archaeologist Theodore Davis made a sensational discovery. In an unobtrusive tomb, he found the remains of puzzling furniture. The chamber was in complete disarray. There were fragments of a shrine bearing the name of Queen Tia, magical bricks bearing cartridges with Akhenaten's name, and a gilded sarcophagus with a royal mummy. Was this the mummy of the heretic? Carefully, priests removed the golden mask that showed the features of the pharaoh. No one was meant to identify this king. Even the cartridge with his name was destroyed. In his lab in Cairo, Dr. Iskander is comparing an X-ray of the unknown king with that of Tutankhamun. Both skulls display so many similarities that they must be those of close relatives. Father and son, Tutankhamun and Akhenaten. The mysterious dead man was only 20 years old when he died, too young to be Akhenaten. He must have been Tut's brother and predecessor on the throne of the pharaohs. Smenkhare, married to one of Akhenaten's daughters. For several years, another mummy whose identity is unresolved has been kept in Dr. Iskander's laboratory. Inscriptions identify it as Amenhotep III.
And then we try to make here some similarity between these two skulls. And you see that this one is too big, and always rejected by the program in the computer about the similarity. The skull here is too big than the usual. But we don't know, maybe this was replaced, or the name which was written on the coffin, on that mummy, was not clear. We are not sure anyway of this, that this is really the Amenhotep III. maybe a mummy piece of horse. The way of embalming here, or mummification method or process, is completely different because it is very weak and the flesh is very little. And we cannot be sure that this is caused by the process itself or suffered from moving from place to place or being played with by the tomb robbers or being played with by the priests of that time. Then we have a shadow here.
Might the unimaginable really be true? Did Akhenaten's mummy escape the destructive fury of his persecutors? In the rubble outside the rock tomb, archaeologists have found fragments of royal tomb furniture, parts of a sarcophagus deliberately smashed to small pieces. It seems to be conclusive proof of a burial of Akhenaten in this place. But what happened to the mummy? Who could have ordered the rescue of the heretic king? Only one single person could have done this. The only pharaoh in whose tomb almost the entire contents remained undisturbed for millennia, Tutankhamun, Akhenaten's son. "1,700 precious burial gifts were discovered by the joyous excavators in 1922 in his tomb in the Valley of the Kings. His shrine proves that Tut reverted to the worship of the old gods. The protective statuettes fulfilled their purpose. No one disturbed the dead man's rest for 3 millennia. The mummy was supposed to exist forever, for only an undamaged body guaranteed eternal life in another world to the pharaoh. For this purpose, first the entrails were removed from the body and kept in special vessels, canopic jars. Palm wine and incense were used to disinfect the abdominal cavity. Spices masked the pungent smell of the corpse. Careful conservation of a dead body could take months, depending on the dead man's wealth, but 70 days was the minimum prescribed. Strict rules had to be observed. After washing the corpse, the embalmers retrieved the innards from the abdomen through a small cut. Only the heart, as the seat of feeling, but also of thought, kept its accustomed place. The brain was removed through the nose using a hook. Then the most important process began, the desiccation. The corpse had to lie in a special salt for 70 days. This drained all liquid from the tissue and prevented it from decomposing. Finally, the corpse was wrapped in fine linen that could be up to 100 meters in length. This extensive and expensive procedure was carried out by specially trained embalmers. The secret recipes and techniques of their highly respected craft were handed down only orally from generation to generation. Pictures on old mummies tell of the secret procedure. First, the body of the dead pharaoh was washed and fragrant balms were poured on it. The uncontested lord of the holy burial rites was the jackal-headed Anubis. A picture that is 3,000 years old shows the god of embalming in the act of stirring bituminous liquid. During their excavations, archaeologists discovered a bowl with a black insulating compound, as if the embalmers were just taking a break. In the Department for Nuclear Spin Tomography of a Berlin hospital, we want to use the latest scientific methods to investigate how the ancient Egyptians used to manufacture eternity. This mummy, almost 2,000 years old and from the Egyptian Fayum region, is screened in the computer tomograph. Modern archaeology has long been using such advanced techniques. In this way, precise three-dimensional images of the mummy's interior are created. The diagnosis is clear. This is a male who died when he was very young. However, according to the beliefs of the ancient Egyptians, his life did not end there. Rather, at the point of death began an eternal, immortal existence in a divine world, for which the corpse had been made suitable through the process of embalming. The image shows a perfect technique of preservation that has kept the corpse almost undamaged for over 2,000 years. The ancient Egyptians were masters of the art of producing eternity. This was their main concern. This was why they built their pyramids and why they took such trouble in embalming their corpses. However, evil will could also achieve the opposite. A corpse merely had to be physically destroyed. The safest method of complete annihilation is to burn a mummy. Was this the fate of Akhenaten? Or is he just buried by the sands of time?